it in the keys? The fingertips that reach out to touch them? The string that begs to be bent? Or is it in the notes on a page? A foot to a pedal? The infinite space between imagination and skill? Or is it simply music?
Well, hello and welcome to the 13th Note Art of Mastery podcast. And I am your host, Jeff Spike Wong. And today we are bringing back Mr. Jay Barth with Mastery, a front of the house engineer. He is an industry veteran, has mixed many shows that I'm sure all of us have fond memories of. And a lot of the shows were very historical. Like recently, I just saw on YouTube that the Anaheim, California Kiss show was remastered and reposted. And we'll start with that, Jay. Jay, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks. I think that one was one of my board tapes that people have latched onto. So
wow. Well, that show has been very popular, no doubt. And I remember as a kid reading about it. And when I first moved to Southern California in '87, somebody bootlegged me a tape of it, and I was just blown away. And then to find out that you did front of the house for that, that's an incredible show, because a lot of my friends who grew up during that period all remember how great that show was.
That was a big whoop-de-doo, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think that was the apex of that particular band, reaching at that stage. I mean, do you remember the Woody Allen movie Annie Hall?
I do.
Do you remember when they were sitting in the cafe scene on the Sunset and there was the billboard for that show?
Yeah.
I mean, it's iconic to the point that it's documented in a feature film.
Yeah.
In that respect.
So,
Jay, I would love to pick up exactly how we were talking about all your experiences in front of the house. But like I was saying to you prior to starting this podcast, that I just really revere and enjoy your knowledge and your history of American music, and just the nitty gritties and the nuances that you talked about, songwriting and things like that. You want to just share with us, on our audience, a little bit about your love affair about songwriting, singers, and American music?
Well, I appreciate all that. I mean, I started playing guitar when I was about 10 years old, and of course, we were learning Beatles songs at the time, and I had a real good friend. His name was Robert Gillespie. He's recently passed away, but he became the two of us played all the time. We were together constantly and playing guitars together. And he went on to play, and then I kind of moved on to other things. But Robert became very, very successful around Detroit. He was a very highly regarded guitar player, and he played with the remake of the MC5, and he played with many years with Mitch Ryder and a couple other bands of his own. He was a very accomplished. But that started my journey into music, and I don't know if we talked about it, I can't remember in the first part, but my first job was with a little local band, and basically because I knew how to plug a guitar in, I started working with them, and I've always had an affinity for music. I love Motown music, and I love a lot of the roots music that goes on in America. The predecessors to rock and roll. I mentioned earlier that I was blessed to go to Muscle Shoals last winter, and hopefully I'm going to get to Stax and Sun in Memphis this winter on our winter avoidance tour when we head south to warm weather. So we try to work our way down there and do something fun on the way. So I just I think a lot of listening and absorbing, and of course songs are something that that we grew up with. When I see on Facebook some of these lists of the top 30 in 1967 or 68 or 70 or whatever.
Right.
And I look at all these songs, and it's just amazing how many, songs that remember in your mind and stuff.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. I think that, music is such of a integral part of our existence.
yep,
And when it's done in that fashion, it ingrains in our DNA. I really believe that we absorb it, especially in our formative years,
sure.
Yeah. And the thing is that we as kids and teens are not really aware of this impact. We just know we felt something.
Yeah, well, that goes on with a lot of my career. I mean, you mentioned Kiss, and if somebody would have told me back then they would still be playing in 2023 or whatever it was, I'd
Right.
probably called the guys in the white suits to take you away because
That's right.
we had
Yeah.
never the idea that it would last as long as it did, but it was fun while we were there for sure.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. That particular band seemed to came in and also blew up after 2 years. And I remember Rolling Stones magazine writing an article in, I believe, 78 saying the band was breaking up.
Yeah,
And I was really puzzled at that point because they were selling so much product. Why would
Yeah.
they break up?
Well, they did go through some changes, so that's
There's no question. I think that goes with every band, right?
yeah.
It's just when you have so many personalities dealing with each other on a regular daily basis traveling. I mean, how could not
Oh yeah.
become somewhat, all of a sudden, I don't like the way you chew your food. I've heard that
Yeah.
story many times.
Well, I think they had a little, Peter especially had a quite a burnout of, the makeup every day and the, just the
Right.
stress was overwhelming to him. So
Yeah. Well, how could it not be with that type of
Yeah.
act? No different than, let's say, if we took a Broadway act, right? Let's say we did a Cats touring company.
sure.
You have to dress that sucker up every day and be
Every
spot
day,
on,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, from a technical point of view, and this is something that I think I would love to understand a little bit more in depth, because in the days of touring in the 70s, you were doing either outside or going into buildings that were not acoustically tuned, like sports arenas, hockey, rinks, things like that. How do you compensate and how do you work around that when you walk in a room?
Well, you kind of just, you just kind of do your best, but you're absolutely right. It's evolved enormously since we were there.
Yeah.
The newer arenas have had a big emphasis on acoustics where they never even thought about it before.
Right.
Anything built probably in the mid 80s and 90s, early 90s and later, been vast improvements in the buildings. And then, they build in facilities for hanging not only sound but lights and now video walls and all this other stuff that some of the places didn't have in those days. A classic example is Pine Knob outside of Detroit. We called them sheds. The places where you've got the covered seating, and then there's a lawn out back outside, and the fans seem to love that sort of thing. But Pine Knob was a very, very difficult situation because if you cut it in half, I like to call it a clamshell effect. It looked like this, so that the opening here to the out to the lawn was very tiny, so the sound would get tremendously contained in there. Well, now if you go in there, they've got probably $100,000 worth of soundproofing hanging in that place that we never had when I was there. So
Sure.
that was and now if you look at those shed type places, the places that have been since then, if you take the side view, they're angled up so that it's like a horn, so the sound naturally travels up the lawn instead of becoming contained. So we just kind of worked with it, Jeff, whatever we could do. You hit the EQ, you watch the volume, and you get what's important out there first, and that's an important part of getting into our musical talk and everything is what's important. One of the biggest mistake I see in shows, and places that I see now is there's too much flipping kick drum.
Hmm.
And the kids nowadays think the kick drum is cool. Well, I've never seen kick drum on a marquee. I'm sorry.
Right.
And it shouldn't be it should rarely ever be the loudest thing in the mix. Every once in a while you get a boom. I call them boom stot songs where the kick and snare are kind of even boom stot. But 99% of rock and roll music is based on the snare. That's what you tap your foot to. That's what you clap to, and that's what you dance to. So,
yeah.
And I'm not saying the snare should be the loudest thing in the world either, but it should definitely not be the kick drum. So that's my 2 cents for
Well, that's an excellent take, and you're absolutely right. As much as the musicians, and I know me as a guitar player has been guilty of this, is can you turn me up, please? And once you turn me up, I still walk over to my amp and turn up some more.
Well,
and of course, this was my younger days, and I got yelled at for doing stupid things like that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, one of the things I think would be challenging if you could address this is that today we have technology that is just so far ahead that we're able to measure frequency distance and make the travel equal to the audience, if you will, where the sounds balanced. Where in the days of the 60s going to 70s and even early 80s, there was no technology that was measuring frequency travels and so forth. So is it now just critical your year is the key?
I think a lot to do with that. I mean, things like SMART have allowed us to time align systems. And I was very early on to use delays, much to the chagrin. Promoters hated it because it would cost some extra time and whatnot. But we would actually carry a delay stack for arenas with Seger tours. After Kiss so much, but mostly with Seger tours because we could put the demands on the promoter and they'd have to do it. So other time, so it depends on the tour you're on, how much ticket power you have, what you can get away with as a sound guy,
Right.
So, but I remember one really interesting thing when you talk about time alignment, there was with the Who back in the 70s, there was a fellow there named, I think his name was Bob Pridden, was their sound guy. And instead of he would put shotgun microphones on the edge of the stage aiming at the amplifiers so that the sound getting picked up by the microphones was kind of delayed to match the PA system.
Okay.
It was kind of a real early on thing. I don't know how well it worked. It was, they sounded for the time pretty good, but it was an interesting concept that he did, and then, you've got all kinds of crazy things like the Grateful Dead wall of sound where they tried to make everybody have each instrument have one big PA system, and that had mixed results, as we all probably know. So but the way that you can do it electronically, I mean, gosh, I'm working with a little church over here in the next town over, and I'm sorry, something's dinging. They've got, it's not the greatest console in the world, but gosh, you can throw a little delay on every channel on the board. You've got compressor, gate, massive amounts of EQ, so you can really, really delve in and time align things in your mix. Amazingly, we never had any of that stuff, so I mean, we had a delay to the thing that we hung in the house, and we'd use a little clicker, a little frog that went click click click, and you'd set the time to where it sounded right.
Sure.
We didn't have SMART or any of that stuff, so
the organicness of it, the thing that required for you being able to think on your feet, that those days are incredible to me in sound engineering, because it literally is like you're a member of the band, you're playing with the band.
Sure.
Let's talk about the vocal aspect of this. Like you said, the name on the marquee is often what that sells the tickets, and most of them are singers and songwriters. Despite of how great the guitar player would be, nobody really went to Van Halen just to see Eddie, except for me and guitar players.
Well,
Most people went to see the whole band and the song.
Eddie
right?
was a big draw, and I mean, a lot of people went to see Rush because of Neil, and you
Right.
have those kind of examples
Right.
here and there. But I was blessed to work with some of the greatest singers in popular music. I mean, I was with Aretha Franklin and Rod Stewart and Bob Seger, and I've spent a lot of time with people who should get more credit, like Robin Zander.
Oh,
and,
sure.
Brian Howe, who was with Bad Company for a long time, but I was with him and with Ted Nugent.
Yeah.
So I've been, blessed at Blondie, Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call them the most iconic voices in the world, but they were certainly iconic as singers, So
Sure.
So yeah, those are the names on the marquee, and it was very important. Of course, you go into sound check, you almost, me like everybody else, I'd start with the kick drum,
Yeah.
Nowadays they do the kick drum and maximize it and just leave it there. Well, no, you don't leave it there. You back it off and you bring it into the mix where it's needed later,
Yeah.
But the most important thing in both sound check and the show was the singer.
Sure.
For
Absolutely.
me, in almost in the majority of the bands that I worked with, it was the singer. So
Yes. Yeah. It's always the song. I've always told all my students and everybody who wants to be in the business saying, how do I make money? You got to write good songs. You got to get good songs.
You bet. And that's, that goes back to our discussion with Kiss. They had songs, they weren't complex. They were, they were a little bit naughty, but they weren't dirty, and they were fun and not too long, and you could sing along to them. And some of them you still hear at in sports stadiums,
no question,
all day long.
Yeah. I think once it's ingrained and it caught a certain flow with the audience, and it becomes embedded into our society. There are certain records became that way. Certain songs definitely became the iconic moment. Like, for instance, I could tell you 1983 high school graduation. I don't know how many high schools use Journey's Don't Stop Believing as their song.
Sure.
Because it just caught the moment, right?
Yep.
So let me ask you, and let's just go from the singer to singer thing. You worked with Bob Seger for quite a while.
16 years. I was.
Yeah. So Bob has a pretty powerful voice from what I can identify with, meaning that he pushes a lot of air. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, more so in the younger days than towards the end, but or towards my end, we were using E flat.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. You got to do what you got to do to sound good for the audience.
Yeah.
So I'm always a proponent of that.
Much to the chagrin of the, the keyboard players or whatnot. So transposed to E flat.
Well, those days, I suppose the technology hasn't where they can just transpose digitally into their instrument.
That's true. Yeah. We did carry a grand piano for quite some time. And, of course, Turn the Page is done on a Wurlitzer piano, which they still have a Wurlitzer over at Muscle Shoals that people use all the time. We used to have to carry 3 of them to have one that worked every day. So.
Yeah. The volatilities of that level of instruments that was out at the times tend to have breakdowns.
Well,
similar like Marshall amps, right?
Don't get me started on Mellotrons either. They were a real adventure. Those things,
I can imagine.
Familiar with that, but the physical, keeping all that stuff working, all the rollers clean and working, and the tapes pulling up and down, and those things, and with the Wurlitzer, you've got these little tines. With a little thing on it that you can tune it with. On every individual one can slide that little weight, and oh boy, it wasn't you'd put it in the truck a couple days, and those things would be all out of whack.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah, they're very delicate in that sense.
Yeah,
and with those type of things, of course, that becomes your daily thing, right? Once everything's off the truck, you're going through a checklist, your start set up, and you're going, oh man, this isn't working. Bring on number 2, and so forth. Was that the same with microphones as well? When you were going ready to do a tour prep, you started going through microphones with your singers, or Do they come to you and say, Jay, I use this?
Well, we did it. It was usually my choice when I was there.
Yeah.
And we had at different times different favorite microphones. Like in the 70s with KISS, we adapted. It was called an Electro Voice DS35. And it was what we found at the time to be the absolute loudest thing in the monitors you could possibly get.
Really?
And it had a pretty decent tight sound. You can see them all over the place. So anytime you look at pictures, I can almost always tell if it was my show or not, because it's the DS35s. Sometime in early 75, we switched over to those, and I can't remember the exact date.
Yeah.
But I went on to use that microphone with Seger as well.
Yeah.
And we were very happy with it. It got great stuff in the monitors. And after that, I think it was 81 or 82, I fell in love with a microphone from Beyer Dynamic called an M700.
Okay.
And I used that. I switched to that to Bob. And I also used that when I went with Rod Stewart. I can't remember what they were using, but the 58s or something. And I said, Rod, can we try this? And we adapted that for the couple of years I was with Rod. So then Aretha's a little bit different story. She worked her microphone up and down and back and forth and never got quite as close as you wish she would.
Really?
But on the other hand, you kind of, she kind of knew what she was doing.
Yeah, sure.
She had done it a few times before. So she was much better. My favorite mic at the time was a Shure. It was an SM87, the condenser microphone that had kind of a nice long reach to pick her up when she was getting away, and it was a little impervious to feedback, but you had to work with her. So she didn't mind whichever microphone I picked, but she did what she wanted to with it, regardless of what you wanted to tell her.
Sure. And like you said, she knows what she wants.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that makes your life a little bit easier when the singer have an idea in their mind.
Well, she once you get the hang of it, she knew what she was doing. There's no question about that. So
yeah.
So that's a little bit of mic history there. So.
Oh, absolutely. I think microphones is one of the things that if you're in the business, you need to really understand the variety and what it offers to the artist.
Sure.
And I know most studio engineers take that very seriously.
Sure.
I very seldom talk to live engineers except for local venues and whatnot. And it seems to be that it's always been for decades the SM series from Shure, because keep on ticking, take the licking thing. You can throw that sucker across the room, pick it up, and still works.
Well, when I toured Muscle Shoals, they're still recording lots of people there on the weekends and stuff in the museum.
Yeah.
And the drum kit's all mic'd up, and it's a 57 on the snare.
Yeah.
So, these kids nowadays are all enamored with different mics and whatnot, but you still see the 57. And you would be amazed at that microphone. A very good friend of mine he's retired now, but he ran the record plant truck, a fellow named Dave Hewitt.
Yeah.
And a very, very famous remote recording guy, probably the best in history. But you'd be amazed how many times they'd pull out an SM57 and put it on a kick drum and blend it in just to get a little bit of pop on there.
Yeah.
Recording.
Yeah. I have actually done that in the studio as well.
Yeah.
Especially coming from the skin on the kick side.
Yeah.
Because you want that's just that slap to get a certain tonality to it, right?
You need a little bit of that thing that SM57s do so well. So
absolutely. It's interesting that you're from Michigan, so you have a lot of history with these Michigan artists, and out of nowhere there's Rod Stewart, the guy from Scotland. And
I think I got into back in the early 80s, we had a company, of course, we did with KISS, and then with Bob, we had a little company called Fanfare. And Fanfare was a regional sound company. We did all kinds of things, but we ended up doing, of course, we did the Joe Walsh tours and we did the Kiss tours.
Yeah.
We did Seger tours, but then the company in the early 80s kind of dissolved, and we were searching for something, a different sound company for 1983 tour. So we ended up using a company called Electrotech out of California. And the owner of the company was a fellow named Ricky Farr. And Ricky was kind of a infamous, he brought the company from England over to California. And Ricky used to be a promoter for like the Isle of Wight festivals and stuff. If you search him, you find all kinds of crazy Ricky Farr stories all over the place. So, but Ricky and I became close friends. He had my wife and I out to his house in California, and he was very close with Rod Stewart and did Rod Stewart. So in around about 84 or so, they were having some trouble on the tour. They couldn't quite get it right. He asked me to go out. They had a fellow that was one of the best guys that I've ever known, and I don't want to, he was the guy you'd want next to you. He could tear the stuff down and rebuild it. Just didn't have the ear for the mix. Most wonderful person you could ever possibly meet.
Right.
But I came in and did it, and they were elated with the first night. It was out at Pine Knob here in outside of Detroit. We had just talked about Pine Knob a little while ago. So
right.
So after that put me onto a 2-year stint with Rod Stewart. So.
Right. So when you got that gig, when you were assessing what were they unhappy about, what did you notice immediately that was not going the right way?
Well, the first thing was getting the voice right.
Okay.
I mean, getting that voice there so you could hear what, it's Rod Stewart. You got to get the voice right, Yeah. So I think it was just a matter of toning things down, getting the balance right, making sure that, the kick drum sit just behind the bass guitar, and that the rhythm guitar was where it's supposed to be, and that the solos came up where they needed to come up. And, it took me a few gigs actually to learn all the nuances of how the solos and stuff came and went, but that's basically, it was just basically putting it to music. So, and like I said, number one, the voice. That's what's on the marquee.
And let's talk about that. When you're saying, get Rod's voice right, and this is far beyond than just, okay, we got a microphone, we're going to make sure he's heard, so it's loud. Then what? I mean, how much more is there? Is there the level of compression, the level of, wetness? What is it?
Well, you don't want to have too much compression, but there's certainly a little bit of leveling that's needed for all these guys. If you can hear the compressor, there's too much. So,
interesting.
That you don't ever want to hear a compressor, so I heard that compressor. Well, then there's a problem, in my opinion. But it's it's finding that little bit of EQ. Each guy's got each guy, like Seger, his voice really wanted just a little 3 or 4 dB at 5K, give him a little bit of upper air.
Right.
And Rod, kind of almost a very similar kind of thing, and the as far as being wet, you kind of listen to the records and see if there's something specific that you want to try to do. If there's a delay or an echo or something you want to replicate. But other than that, it was just just a tiny bit of wetness, depending on where you're at. Obviously outdoor gigs require a little more grease than an indoor gig does. And learning how to use things like pre-delay when you're using reverb on a voice can make a big difference. So to kind of separate the voice from when the reverb starts gets you avoids you making it muddy. So so those are kind of little things that you think about.
In this particular situation, when you're working live shows, how much relationship are you working with the monitor guy?
Oh, quite a bit. I mean, we
Okay.
always have to agree on things, get the microphones right. And,
Mhm.
you know, um, yeah, you work together for sure. If there's
Okay.
something going on stage that's interrupting you out front, you got to talk about it. If there's something
Right.
coming off the stage too loud
Right.
or whatnot, that's a place for discussion.
Sure. Sure.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I think one of the misnomers on most bands is the how loud they are on stage. I understand, of course, there's bands, especially the days of the Who, Van Halen, the heavy guitar trio,
Sure.
the thing. But on the average, a performer like Bob, who has this great dynamic of song catalog where he can quiet it down, where
Hmm.
he dynamically shows up. I mean, how loud is this stage volume for his performance?
Oh, with Bob, it was never terribly bad.
Yeah,
It was always pretty well controlled with him. There was no
yeah,
massive, if there was the guitar player had a Marshall head in one box, and
uh,
that was it. The bass player always used to sit on SVT with two bottoms to
mm,
all the way up to the last tour they did. That's all he ever did, the same thing all the time.
right.
So it was always pretty well in line. Nothing
Is it
outrageous.
something that I like? Say, if I was on stage, I could walk up to my band member and say something, they could hear me.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so it
Yeah.
isn't devastatingly like
Oh,
I have
yeah,
to scream it
absolutely.
across. Okay,
Yeah.
and who's the loudest on stage that you remember working with?
Oh, well, it'd probably have to be Ted.
Is that surprising, right?
Yeah, that's not. Even Kiss wasn't as loud as Ted.
Right.
Kiss was fairly. Well, I wouldn't say tame. I mean, they were loud, but Ace would use two Marshall stacks. Paul always had one,
Right.
and Gene had an SVT head with a dependent. He started out with a couple of, a wall of things, but basically two boxes.
Yeah.
And then when we switched over to the JBL boxes, I think he used 4 of those horn
Wow.
cabinets.
Right.
So
Right.
it wasn't like, you see this big wall of stuff and it's not all on.
No. I fully learned that
Yeah.
a long time ago that the presentation outweighs what you actually use.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny is I actually knew guys that had Marshalls on stage, and yet inside the Marshall box is another amp.
That could be it too. I mean,
Yeah.
like with Cheap Trick, Rick's guitar, um, I mean, he did have one Marshall box that he used, but his main guitar thing was a little deluxe reverb that was off on the side, and
Yeah.
that's where we got 99% of his tone and sound from, was that deluxe reverb.
How funny.
Yep.
Yeah. Let me share one story with you, and let's talk about Cheap Trick a little bit. I was very fortunate. All Shook Up tour. They played Houston in the place called Sam Houston Coliseum. I don't know if you remember that
Mhm.
venue. You probably did that with Kiss. The
Absolutely.
way that it's like sports arena type of thing. The set of the stage in front of the house, speakers, everything up front. There was a section to the stage left, I believe, that did not sell because it was too crunched up and you couldn't see anything.
Right.
But if you ran down there, what you'd end up doing is standing next to Dave, who's Rick's tech,
Yeah.
and you're watching him probably within 5 feet of
Yeah.
him unboxing guitars after guitars after guitars, to the point where I'm thinking to myself, you got to be kidding. How hard is this guy's job?
Yeah. He
Because
was a
he's
master.
not only tuning it, he has to pack it right after they're done on certain songs. And a couple of things that really came to me that blew my mind. Dave was playing the keyboard part to Surrender.
Okay.
And I wasn't expecting that. Back then, they didn't hire another guy
Right.
in the curtain. Then on top of that, Dave made sure there was an oxygen tank ready for Rick.
Right.
When Rick would bounce around like a
Sure.
mad monkey, and he'll run to the side, and immediately he'll grab the mask, put it over his face, and get oxygen.
Get a little dose. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen this in any rock band
Well,
until I saw.
I
Cheap
tell
Trick.
you what, I mean, Dave, rest in peace, Dave. That's for sure. He was a wonderful guy. But Rick, I tell you one thing about Rick. A lot of bands, you solo up the guitar and you go, oh my God. With Rick, you'd solo up the guitar and it's like, how the hell does he do it? It was so clean and so right on.
Yeah.
He rarely had mistakes on it. It was amazing how good the guitar sounds with him running around, throwing picks, acting like crazy.
Yeah.
But spot on, spot on. A very underrated guy and a wonderful friend of mine for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Rick was a big influence on me on how to do a great show for your audience.
Yeah,
There's no question. I learned a lot of that from him.
Yeah.
Another thing, what I loved about Cheap Trick writing is they use different instruments. Number 1 to 12 string bass guitar was
Sure.
first seen to all of us with
Yep.
Cheap Trick and Tom. But the aspect of also how Robin would come up and play a 6-string or 12-string, sometimes an acoustic, added a depth to that band's sound as well. And then Rick, being a vintage guitar guy, he didn't try to keep up with the Joneses in the 80s, meaning, okay, everybody's getting a 1 pickup Stratocaster with a locking tremolo.
Right.
He was still doing the Hamer. He was still doing his 59 Les Pauls. And like you said, he was using that little Fender amp. And I remember just how dynamic those notes would pop off his guitars.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Compared to the guys that were playing, like, say, Rat, Scorpions.
Yeah. And he didn't overplay. He put the right thing in there with the right thing at the right time. So,
yeah, absolutely. And would you say Robin was an underrated vocalist?
Absolutely. He's one of the best singers in rock and roll history for sure.
Yeah.
In my top 5 or whatever. I mean, Robin can sing. And the last time I saw him, which was a couple years ago, he's still singing like a bird.
Yeah. He just has such a great delivery, great inflection, the way he tells his stories.
Great voice.
Yeah.
Absolutely fabulous voice. They were a fun bunch to mix, that's for sure.
When you have a vocalist that have those type of distinctive styles, do you just pretty much set it and let them do their thing?
Yeah, kind of. If you listen to Robin and a lot of the records and stuff, there's almost always a little tiny hint of doubling on it. Like it's about a 60 to 90 millisecond, just a touch.
Yeah.
So we would have that quite a bit. And, nothing overpowered, just a little bit, so.
Yeah. And that's interesting because that makes his sound.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
And it's prevalent with him. So.
All right. So let me ask you this part about live performances have recently now gotten to the point where it seems to be there's a lot of pre-recorded tracks. And almost to the point that the featured artist seems to be mimicking and basically out there faking it.
Seems to be a lot of that going on. I mean, it didn't occur in my time or the bands I toured with. We never did any of that.
Was there any kind of pre-recorded backing tracks at that point in the 70s and the 80s? Or is this a total manufacturing of the 2000s and up?
It's after my time, that's for sure.
Okay. So, see, that's
good. We had an extra guy out there, like my good friend Todd Howarth.
Yes.
Played with Cheap Trick as well as Ted Nugent, both tours that I did. So, and Toddley played, he would help Robin on some of the high notes and backing vocals and keyboard. And with Ted, he also did keys and some singing. So very talented guy, wonderful guy, Todd Howarth.
Right. And any reason why Todd just ended up being such a great utility player for everybody and not him in his own band?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, he's been around Haley's Comet, and of course he was with 707 back in the 70s.
Yeah.
They had a couple hit records regionally around at least in the Midwest. So yeah, he's been around the block. Great guy, great talent. Right. He puts out some of his own stuff if you search him out. He's got some things out there. So.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when I was in LA, I remember in the music paper, Music Connection magazine, that Todd had a big ad out, and he was looking for players for his own solo band. And one of my buddies actually got in. But they never went anywhere with it. That was the part that I was really surprised.
Yeah. What are you going to do?
Right. Well, that's exactly. It seems to be that even though if you're in the business, you're connected, that when you want to do something, everybody's going to rejoice and help you out.
Well, he's been around for everybody else. That's for sure. So Yeah.
Todd's a great talent, no doubt. Yeah. So with let's go back to Rod real quick. Ron
Sure.
Stewart's a very high energy performer. There's no
Yep.
doubt that he has spanned decades from the Faces, Jeff Beck, all the way to his, acoustic, and then jumping into that disco hybrid with his sound, and
Yep.
then ultimately became a crooner style singer as well.
Yeah. That
It,
was a
it,
little after my time.
I just thought, this guy was so brilliant in the way he developed his career path. But when you're doing a show and you're doing Stay With Me, and then you're doing Maggie May, and then all of a sudden you're going to do Hot Legs, these are all dynamically different type of sounds. And
Sure.
then the big hit, Do You Think I'm Sexy? Which
Right.
is entirely a different. Do you actually have to approach the mix differently, or are you pretty much no, the band's going to do it?
Yeah, the band at my time, the band did most of it.
Yeah.
They came across with it, and it was just a matter of
Yeah.
watching levels at that point. And like anything else, it's the quieter the song, the more you have to turn it up. So
Right.
you just got to kind of watch stuff coming at you. But
In acoustic instruments in that performances, was that hard to work with because he had different layers opposed to just here's a guy with an acoustic strumming it.
yeah, it wasn't. There wasn't really a lot of that. There was a fellow named John Corey who played acoustic guitar on a few things, and it just kind of melded in. It wasn't too difficult or dramatic or anything.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
And with Bob, same, because Bob also has that similar dynamic.
pretty
He's going to
much.
quiet
Yeah.
down for you, and everybody's going to bring out their lighters, right?
Yep. Bob would play acoustics on a number of songs, and even alto played acoustic guitar a couple times.
Right. Yeah. And to me, the dynamic of acoustic guitars live when it's done right, it's just so moving because it's so honest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. And,
Well, with Seger, the like, there would be times like with Turn the Page where the crowd was singing so loud you just couldn't turn it up anymore, or it would feed back.
wow.
So, I mean, you've got it on the edge of ringing,
Right.
and the crowd's louder than the PA. So that gives you
great.
that gives you a little goosebump,
Sure. How could it not? Right. Yeah. So when you're going into doing these shows day after day on a tour, do you start out just from zeroing out your board and then start from that, or do you already have preconceived ways of saying, "Hey, you know what, Bob's going to need this 5/8 right here"? So
your channel EQs all pretty much stay close to the same.
Okay.
Your masters, your system EQs will change day to day, but once you get the PA tuned, I'm not saying you never tweak something a little bit. Of course you do, but for the most part, if something had a honk at 400 cycles in one room, it'll have a honk at 400 in another room, as long as the PA system is tuned. So channel stuff, not that much, very, very rare, but the overall EQ, of course.
Yeah. And I think these are such intricate details, right? In regards to getting the great performance and great sound, because the audience is getting this from the system, and you're the guy who's bringing it, and then the audience is going to give back their enthusiasm to the performer who's doing it. Without that, it's like sound check. Guys can go out there, sound great, but they're not really knowing what they're sounding like on stage.
Right.
And to me, what is the best way to kind of learn this craft of sound engineering? Because there's schools, right, and there's programs,
right,
but from what I've seen across the board, unless you put hands on and really doing it, school is kind of paled with, okay, now something's happening. What are you going to do now? Right.
Sure.
So can you kind of share with us a little bit about the wisdom of learning this art?
Well, I think there's certainly some trial and error involved. I can't say I never made a mistake, but you try to learn from it, and and I think it goes back to a little bit of what we talked about earlier in the talk, of just about understanding music and the layers and where things are at. You understand that the voice is the most important part. You understand that, the layer, the bass guitar, and the drums have their place, and the rhythm, and there's the rhythm, and then there's the solos, whether they be keyboards or guitars, or what am I? There's the melodies, and there's just layering the music in the right place is the first thing that you really start at, and you can do that in a club or in an arena, but it's approaching the music as music, and getting it layered together appropriately. I think is
right.
One way that I would put it.
Gotcha. For folks who's really interested in being in the business, right? I mean, what would you say would be the best way to start? Was it go find a band that's unknown and just kind of work with them and develop?
Absolutely. Sure. Get yourself started, listen to a lot of music, learn, understand the parts. If you listen to the radio, you'll, going back to where we were before, you're not going to hear too much kick drum on most songs.
Right.
You're going to hear how things are layered and how things are together, and take them with you when you do it.
Yeah. So when you're doing front of house for a tour, and different bands and different requirements and things of that nature, so for someone like Aretha, who is known as an individual artist, she brings her band in through whatever means of her management, auditions, and whatnot. Is that more difficult to work with than, let's say, an established band such as Kiss that comes in year after year being the same?
With Aretha, there was a handful of players that were with us almost all the time.
Okay.
And there was the bass player was almost all the time. The drummer there was two drummers, but one guy played most of the time. Her son, Ted, played guitar. She had a piano player and musical director, a fellow named H.B. Barnum, very, very, very famous arranger and guy. If you search him, he's works with everybody. He's a great, wonderful guy. So, and then we would have a setup of local musicians, horns and strings. It was basically a small, maybe 12-piece or so orchestra that we would deal with every day. So that was different people. So during the sound check, they were basically reading charts. But there was always a guy that blew it. There's a couple sax solos in her stuff, they were always pretty fine musicians, But they were, they didn't do it every day either. So that was a big part of sound check, was rehearsing the band, rehearsing the orchestra, the locals.
Right. And with all these bands, they're still, I would say, categorized as more contemporary pop, rock based type of acts. Have you ever done something away from this genre? Like, for instance, mix a violin concerto, having to do a jazz trio?
I've done a few things that were kind of jazzy and theatrical. Boy, I did a few gigs with Dave Brubeck and his son Chris, who's a friend,
right?
And those were sort of like in churches and stuff, but like jazz trio things. I did a European tour with a fellow named Django Edwards back in the early 80s or late 70s. I can't remember the date, but we toured all over like Italy and whatnot. And he was a theatrical, it was a stage show basically with a little bit of music involved. He was a self-proclaimed professional asshole, and he was just a character. If you search Django Edwards, he sang songs like "Life would be oh so sweet if I were a bicycle seat."
That's funny.
So and he's passed away about 2 years ago now.
Mm.
He lived in Amsterdam, so we did a lot of gigs in Amsterdam. We did a whole tour through Italy, and it was part of like the Italian public broadcasting or something. And it was a trip. That was very different, than anything else that I've ever
Sure.
done.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. That's great. That do something a little bit away from your so-called
Yeah.
bread and butter type of gig.
Yeah.
And have you ever worked with a lavalier mic with any of the live shows?
Not in shows, but a lot in churches. I do, I've had a history of doing churches after my touring days. I joined up with a group in Ann Arbor here. In fact, I was still touring when I was working with we called it Creative Audio.
Mhm.
We did a lot of churches around Detroit, and we did the Michigan football stadium. We did the Michigan hockey arena. We did sound systems all over the place. But yes, I've done a lot of lavalier mic stuff with these pastors and whatnot. And of course, if we can talk them into using a headset nowadays, we do.
Okay. Is that better? The headset with the
Yeah, you could get the closer to the source helps you a lot, But I've dealt with them quite a bit.
Yeah,
you bet.
I've
done a lot of church music.
Sure, and I can see the value of using definitely the headset mic. But one thing I've learned about headset mic too is that it seems to be there's the creme de la creme pro level, and then there's all the crap. There's not really an in between compared to like the handheld stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really had much work with the lower level of it. It's always been something pretty good. So
yeah. And again, I do podcasts. So, when I was researching microphones, definitely that was a consideration doing headsets because it just looked cool on screen. But at the same time, I could not by it's a stretch of thinking that, okay, let's spend $3,000 or $2,000 on this.
Right.
Well,
nowadays the podcast world has gone on to big, beautiful microphones.
Well, the good old RE20 serves perfect. I mean,
yeah. Well,
it's been in so many radios, right?
I have a large diaphragm condenser mic here, so
yeah, you sound like Stewart. This sounds great, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people really need to understand to create great sound. Your number one source is your microphone.
Yeah. Well, I inherited this from my sales routine that I did for a while. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So is there ever let's say if you had a magic wand to go back any time period in history of music, who would you like to be the front of house for?
Oh, boy. I mean, Jimi Hendrix would always come to the top of my list in that dream world kind of thing.
Sure.
I mean, if you're going to dream about mixing anything, it would be something like that,
Would he be hard to, from all the things we've watched and seen and heard, and of course you've talked to Eddie Kramer before as well, so
sure
you have a little bit more insight than most. But when I look at Jimi Hendrix, I mean, he seems to be this crazy runaway freight train that he was able to harness in at a drop of a dime. That's how good of a player he was to his gear. Would that be a nightmare for you as a sound man?
I think it'd probably be fairly easy, to be honest.
Just because how good he is?
Yeah, well, just get all three guys sounding good and let them have at it.
Right. What about that Woodstock performance when he brought out a bunch of percussives and a second guitarist? Did you like that incarnation of Jimmy?
I have to think back about it. I haven't really given it any thought. I mean, I certainly watched it, but haven't really thought about it.
Well, I know that everybody really revered Jimi Hendrix in the Experience. Right?
Sure.
And I love that band too. And the reason why I know a lot of this crap because I was in a Hendrix tribute band as the bass player.
Oh, okay. There
Yeah,
you
so I
go.
had to learn his entire catalog. But we
Yeah.
had a guy who was a black gentleman that played left-handed, could play his stuff to no end.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a major trait to be in a band that to be able to do the 609 and and things like that.
Well, the other band that had a big influence on me was that, and from watching them, was the Moody Blues, and I think that was, I mean, one of the main things was the Mellotron. They were the first ones to bring that thing around.
Yeah,
and of course we used it with Joe Walsh. That's the experience I've had with those crazy things.
right.
But when I first heard that, it was Cobo Hall in Detroit. I'm like, oh my God, listen to that. It's the whole orchestra's here. Oh my God. It was amazing. Of course, now we've got synths and samples and everything else, but as a youngster, the first time you heard that was like, whoa.
Sure. And that's the thing I remember as a kid too, that Moody Blues records and Moody Blues songs sounded so different.
Yeah.
In sense of what the contemporaries were.
Yeah.
And again, that it attributes to the songwriting and the creative minds.
Yeah.
Because I think with you working in the business starting from the 60s and I start catching on to music right about 5-6 years after that. One of the key things that I think was sorely missed is the organicness of the songwriting and the song performance from that level.
Sure.
And that's why today, give me some thoughts about where the music scene is today and how we're, being solicited by the record business in the fashion that it is today compared to what it was.
You know what? It's so different. I don't really hear very much of it, to be honest, Jeff.
Yeah.
These youngsters, they look for different sources and every once in a while somebody will say, hey, listen to this, and I'll listen. That's pretty good. But the one thing that's lacking that we've talked about is the songs. You just don't hear that song that gets played over and over. The songs that there's songs that cross genres. They get played at the football stadium or they're played in backgrounds or the different kinds of radio stations. Just great songs or. I just don't. I'm not hearing a lot of them these days, so I don't know. There's some great players out there. People are wonderfully talented,
right?
And they can play things, but I don't. Nothing comes into mind that I kind of remember. So.
Sure. I'm with you on that because I try to be open-minded. I've always been a supporter of all genres of music until they're absolute garbage.
Yeah.
One of the key things that I remember about 12 years ago, Taylor Swift was really coming on and huge, and I got a lot of girls wanting to take guitar lessons because of her.
Sure.
And what most of the girls realize after about 2 weeks of lessons is I can't do this in 2 weeks. Despite of it's only 4-chord progression for that song. This girl has sold so many freaking records. It's insane.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. But I listened to the production in what I'm hearing in the quality of it. It's okay. It's not groundbreaking. It's not like the first time we heard Revolver or Sgt. Pepper.
Right.
Or Pet Sound.
Well,
it's not the, or it's our first time ever putting on Zeppelin 4 and go, whoa, wait a minute here.
Yeah.
So I think the audience has been kind of trained to dumb down the music intellect. You want to comment a little bit on that?
Well, I mean, that's probably a good way to look at it. I every generation says, "Oh, that the new stuff isn't any," and maybe I just haven't heard the right stuff. But I feel the same way. It's not the same out there, especially the overly popular stuff. I mean, Taylor Swift sold 1 million albums, but if you ask me to sing one of her songs,
right?
but I always when I have this discussion, I think of that. Now I can't even remember their names, but the Nashville group that kind of crossed over to it, and it's 1:15. I'm all alone and I need someone. Well, that song, I heard it everywhere, and I could
Right.
remember it. And it was, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago or something like that. It's the last one of the last ones that I seem to remember that sticks in my mind. And I look at some of these artists, and
Right.
I look at somebody like Bruno Mars, who's phenomenally talented.
Yeah.
And he's got that Uptown Funk record, kind of came close.
Mhm.
But if that guy had one song that flipped over all the genres and everybody heard,
Yeah.
he'd be as big as Taylor Swift. I mean, he's already big, don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
right,
He's
right.
real big, but that's the only song I can think of that he has,
Right.
so I don't know.
Right.
Phenomenally talented, but
Well, I think the performers that become superstars, we're talking about super top levels.
right.
They're made by the industry pros.
Yeah, nowadays that's for sure. You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Well, it's always been that way a little bit, I guess. So,
Right.
there's always been some influence, but
record companies have a singles department that pushes particular
Yeah.
songs.
yeah,
And I've learned from the inside to see that, if a song coming out of release didn't do much, if the manager rattled the cage and the record company is, on par being, knowing the importance of what this guy brings to the table in the
Right.
business, that they would repackage and re-release
yeah,
and then put extra effort in promoting this sucker.
yeah,
And to the point where they were charting this on a calendar, say, okay, we're going to put this single out, and by this date, it's going to be #1 in Billboard.
yeah.
And surprisingly, they're never off by more than one day.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
I love seeing some of the old pictures of the folks at Motown. They would gather the whole crew, the receptionists and the secretaries and the janitors and the engineers and the band guys, and
Yeah.
they would all get in a room and they'd listen to songs and rate them up or down.
wow. Sure, I can see that.
Yeah.
Because back in those days, it really was, I think, the organicness of this. There
Yeah.
wasn't that there's 2-3 multi-platinum producers sitting in a room
Yeah.
cutting, pieces, samples, and creating this monstrosity that becomes
Yeah.
now spoon-fed to the audience.
Well, that Motown stuff is like magic to me. So
Yeah, me too. I think Motown is one of the greatest American music history stories.
yep.
And maybe one day we could put together something like that, Jay.
Yeah, there you go.
The masteries of songwriting and the mastery of American music, because to me, I think that's going to be sad day when the generation is going to go, oh, who's that? No, I'm not aware of who's the Temptations.
Well, I'm amazed at how many kids nowadays, friends, children, and whatnot, that are in their teens or 20s that listen to classic rock stations or
Yeah.
something. They know a whole bunch of the stuff, which is pretty cool, because it's, the modern stuff's not as good.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I'll share this real quick. I have a 14-year-old granddaughter that visits my house often. And of course, she's into K-pop and all the kind of hip hop and pop, what I call garbage stuff, because there's really not much instrumentation.
Right.
It's just a bunch of, follow the beat and here's
Right.
a little hook. But the other day, without saying anything, I put on Rumor from Fleetwood Mac, and that record was a monster when it came out.
Sure.
And about 3-4 songs into it, of course, Dreams come on, and all the songs that we've heard, you and I would know.
Yeah.
She never heard. And by 3-4 songs into it, she looks at me, she goes, "What is this?"
Yeah.
And I said to her, "Fleetwood Mac." She goes, "This is incredible." And I go, "Yeah, this is probably one of the best-selling records in the 1970s." And her jaw just dropped.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me that you can play these great albums to any age. I mean,
Sure.
and as long as they have an open mind and open heart to music, it would move them.
Yeah, you bet. You
Yeah.
bet. Good
And
stuff.
that's the part that I really, I appreciate what you bring to the table, because, once I buy the record, I'm looking at the album jacket over and over because back then that was it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the magazines. Look at that.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to go get my ticket now, stand in line. And then that moment comes. Number one, back in those days, you walk into the arena, smells like pop.
Yeah.
There's no trick to any of that. All the bands I went to. And what's interesting, too, is because how robust that business was, the touring industry, that I was probably seeing 1 to 2 bands a week.
Yeah.
On that level. Like,
Yeah.
I'll have a Journey concert on a Tuesday, and Ted Nugent would show up on a Friday.
Yeah.
The following week, I have Kiss on Wednesday, Thursday, 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
And that was just so great because today now is what you get: Heart, Journey, Loverboy, and opening act with Don Henley or Don Felder.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of going, wow, they're cramming what used to sell 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 seaters now into a 6,000 seat arena as a package deal.
And they're charging you 4 times as much as the old 6 tickets would have.
So before we wrap up, let's talk about that. Why is I talked to a lot of industry people about this, and first thing they always throw at me is, oh, it's the insurance, And I'm thinking, what? Was there no insurance when I was going to concerts? Is that why kids got stomped in Cincinnati?
Yeah.
What's going on here? You can't tell me that I was going to see bands such as Kiss and Van Halen for under $10.
Yeah.
And now if I want nosebleed Kiss shows, it's $75.
If that. I mean, there's a lot of the production. I mean, it was a big deal in Kiss when we had 2 trucks.
Yeah, I bet.
Now they've got 40 trucks or something.
Right.
It's like
some
of these things have, the amount of trucks, some of them that hip hop, some of them flip flop stadium tours, and they'll have like 200 trucks.
That's nuts.
2 sets of stuff. And all that stuff costs money, I guess, the video walls and, I don't know, everything's gone up. So, like anything else, I guess, salaries, the amount of equipment, the cost of equipment.
Right. How about the demanding writers that the artists put out?
Well, yeah.
Some of the things
some of them are crazy, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just from those, but it's still just, I can't just even believe and justify at this point that somebody come into the town that's putting on a nice national tour. The most affordable ticket is $150.
Yeah.
Right. Average ticket price is around $400. Yeah. And if you want to be down in front, it's $1,000.
And then there's Taylor Swift.
And then there's Taylor Swift. Then there's Paul McCartney, and then there's Rolling Stones.
That's
right.
Crazy.
Where if you want to be in the pit, it's $4,000.
Crazy stuff, isn't it?
I mean, how can anybody enjoy and have that kind of level of spending power on a middle class family?
It's beyond me,
That to me is what's killing the business of touring.
Yeah.
That to me also is killing what used to be such a fruitful music scene at any given time. I think, especially coming out of counterculture 67, 68, you just had so many talents all the way into the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Right. By the late 90s was what I started seeing the scaling back.
Yep.
People start to just regurgitate same old.
It was amazing what we could see that back then for the money we could see it. That, I mean, I remember going to the Grandy Ballroom and stuff. It was like $4. And, we'd see, I remember seeing the Who when they did Tommy there. And, incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, these guys were getting paid pretty decent money.
Yeah.
It wasn't, like I remember Hendrix his take was like $20,000 a show.
Yeah.
And that's nothing to sneeze at in 1969, 70.
For the time, yeah.
Right? But is that converted now to, Taylor Swift getting $10 million for a show? I mean, really?
Well,
and the irony behind Kiss, let's just kind of look at that real quick, that Kiss puts on this great big LED walls and so forth to do half the stuff that looked like what Kiss looked like in the 70s.
Right.
Which is like, is it cheaper to do an LED wall? I thought it was, because back in the days where you have to pack explosives and you have to do fire pots and all that, to me, that was more dangerous, more costly insurance than it is to just fake it with stuff.
Yeah, it was probably more dangerous. That's for sure.
Right. Like you said, Moose blew off his hand.
Yeah.
Right. With the ticket. I remember reading that story in the touring, the book that you guys had for KISS behind the scenes thing. And I just was like, wow, and it's like, was he taken care of? Is there medical benefit, insurance when you guys?
Well, yeah, no, there was nothing like that back in those days.
So it was like, oh man, let's go home, heal up, and then we'll see you back on the road.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, Moose never did come back on the road. He sort of stayed home, but
well, after that, I can imagine. Yeah. And that the flash pots and fire pots and those days were extremely dangerous, because I was in a band in one and I almost got burned up in one. Metallica, of course, the big mistake they did, burning up half of James Hetfield.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how many times it was close for KISS, especially with Ace kind of weaving and bobbing half the time.
Well, and they used to blow up our speakers quite, like the side fill speakers. Yeah. We had to make them move because we every day they were blowing up. And what would happen is when the bomb was too close to the speaker, what happens is you get the explosion, which kind of pushes the speaker in. But then what the worst part that happens is there becomes a vacuum of air, and it literally sucks the cone right out of the frame. So we'd get the next day, there's just paper all over the place,
right?
So we finally had to say, guys, we got to move these, or you're going to start, it's, because they would have to pay for the speakers,
right?
So look, there's, even back then, a 15-inch woofer was $100. So, every time right. we got to, and then we got to put it in the next day. Let's just move them a little way. So.
Right. When something like that happened, do you actually have like boxes of speakers replacement with
Sometimes
you?
Not there was a time when we didn't have enough. We were having to overnight things, and that got real expensive. So the band moved the bombs.
Wow. Yeah. I love your stories. These are incredible experiences, because you know what, they're so true to behind the scenes stuff that we as audience took, for granted. We just didn't know.
Yeah.
We just showed up just thinking, well, I paid my ticket price and I'm ready to have this earth-shattering experience. And you know what? Every time it was delivered. It was, when you're seeing bands from that era, the Cheap Trick, to Ted Nugent, to Bob, KISS definitely made that wave around. So I'm so grateful and thankful for you, Jay, to come on to talk in depth about this. Hey, why don't you stay on for a second after we run off? I'd like to talk to you about a little bit more about song real quick. Okay.
Okay. No problem.
And, for our audience, I want to thank you so much for tuning in for the Art of Mastery in the Mastery from the House with Jay Barth. You can, of course, reach Jay on his website. I will have all the information on the description. Everybody, please like and subscribe, and I will see you soon on the next Art of Mastery podcast.